All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Thursday, January 9th, and this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and we've got college football playoffs tonight, and what a great weekend for football fans. Not only do you have the semifinals for college football, you also have the NFL playoffs underway and wild card weekend starting up on Saturday as well. But we will have the Penn State Notre Dame game tonight, and then tomorrow night we will have the big one. A little over 24 hours away. Texas, Ohio State, and Jake, we've talked about it at exhaustion, but we are going to break down this Texas-Ohio State game statistically, where they rank, how these two teams match up against one another, where the strengths and weaknesses are. We're going to give some in-game predictions, and we'll talk a little bit about the spread as well and what those numbers look like. And then finally, we will give our final game day prediction scores right here. And then next time you'll see us, we will either be smiling ear to ear, or we'll probably be pretty upset that the season is over. But those are your one or two options come Friday night, and we're going to be right here with you every step of the way. Jake, how are you feeling? Where are the nerves? Are you kind of settling in, or have you just been like, you know what, our fate is our fate, and I'm happy where we're at, or this could be the season? Where are you at? Where are you feeling?
I'm nervous, not from I don't want this to sound like a loser mentality, because I certainly want Texas to win, and I'll be disappointed if they lose regardless. But I'm nervous about how the game's going to play out to start. I want Texas to make this a football game and give themselves a chance to win. You got to avoid what happened to Oregon and Tennessee. And I mean, I think Ohio State's outscored those two opponents like 42-0 in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that, which is just ridiculous.
Something
so
crazy.
I want Texas to come out and play their best football. And that's what I'm nervous about is are we going to get a Texas that comes out and shoots themselves in the foot? Because if they do that against this Ohio State team and Ohio State continues to play how they have been, it's going to be us recording early before the game's over. And I don't want that, because I think this Texas team is better than that. So I'd say my nerves just rely purely on what Texas is going to show up and just wanting the best version of this team to show up to either advance to a national championship and all of our dreams come true this season, or to at least say they just lost to the better team. They played a good game and it wasn't enough. That I'm hoping to have one of those outcomes. Obviously, I want the win, but I don't want to be sitting there going, well, we beat Clemson and Arizona State, but then we lost by 40 to Ohio State. And that's not what I want to be discussing on here after the game.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility. We talked about this with Texas, Arizona State, right? I think there's only a couple of possibilities here, and unfortunately, none of them are really in favor of Texas. But I think it's an Ohio State blowout, an Ohio State close win, or a Texas close win. I think those are your three options.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a little more room for a Texas blowout than there was for an Arizona State over Texas. I don't think it's that drastic because we have seen, I mean, if Ohio State plays a Michigan game, Texas could blow that team out.
If they play a Nebraska game, people forget. I mean, they beat Nebraska by like a touchdown or two.
But and a lot of it's on the shoulders of Will Howard. Is Will Howard going to play like he has been the last 2 weeks, or is he going to play? And he didn't have a bad regular season, but he was much more mortal looking. And the Ohio State offense was much more touch and go, kind of like the Texas offense in a way, where they were relying on a really great defense at times, especially in their matchups against better teams. So I think there's room for a Texas blowout here, but I think it's very unlikely. Yeah. I think if Texas is going to win, this is going to be one of those games. It's even Arizona State ends up looking close. Vanderbilt ends up looking close. Other than that SEC title game, maybe, we haven't seen a true back and forth type game for Texas this year. And I think there's a chance it could be this could be that game.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see it, Jake. Let's talk a little bit about the spread before we really get into the matchup and how these two teams fare against one another in terms of how their seasons have gone. The spread back down to 5.5. It was at 6 at one point. I think it got all the way up on some sites up to 6.5, but down to 5.5 now for Ohio State. 53.5 on the over under. Jake, I look at that over under and I'm conflicted with it.
Yeah, I mean, I would.
I think it's a good
over.
number. I think it's a good number.
I think it's a good number. I could definitely see this being one of those games where the Texas defense plays more like the defense we saw in the regular season. The offense struggles to score because, make no mistake about it, Ohio State's the best defense Texas has played against this year.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're the best defense in the country.
Yeah, and maybe they don't match up quite the same as Georgia, just because Georgia's front seven is so just stupidly talented.
Does that have something to do with the Big Ten, by the way? Their defense? They're not. It's not the most. It's not the most like prolific pass heavy conference. Let's be real.
Yes, until I saw what they did to Oregon, because I do think Oregon's offense is legit as it comes. I think Oregon's offense is better than Texas's offense.
They did it to Tennessee. Tennessee's got a pretty good offense.
Though I will say, I think Texas has a better offensive line than both Tennessee and Oregon, and that to me,
and I think I also think they have a better defense than both Tennessee and Oregon. They have a better offensive line and they have a better defense than both those two teams.
Certainly better than Oregon, and I would say better than Tennessee as well. Though Tennessee's defense isn't horrible.
No,
and to be fair, Tennessee just started that game terrible. Once they settled in, it looked like they were maybe going to make it a game, but then Ohio State got the drive they needed to kind of put it away.
It was a home game as well.
And it was a home game.
Oh, at Ohio State is not an easy place to play.
No, I realized people Vol takeover. Well, it was still a Ohio State crowd. That there was orange in those stands, but it was a heavy Ohio State. It was a home game for Ohio State, and so sure. I do think there is some of that baked into this because I'd originally said I thought Oregon was a better matchup for Texas, and I stand by that because Oregon's defense is clearly not to the standard of an Ohio State defense. I think Ohio State's a more complete team. And that's what's scary about Ohio State. But at the same time, if you can handle their offensive line, which ironically has looked better since they had some injuries, I think they ended up finding their best five by having an injury happen. If you can handle their offensive line and pressure and make Will Howard feel uncomfortable, we've seen him make mistakes not only throughout his career, but even within this season. So to me, that's a big thing in this game. And the other thing is we need the offensive line to have an A&M game. I mean, they need to have their best game of the season, a Clemson and A&M game. Those are two. The A&M front is much better than the Clemson front. So that's why I say A&M, because I know they only scored 17 points in that game. The offensive line deserved for 40 points to be up in that game.
Yeah. No, Jake, you're 100% right, because I think here's my thing with the matchup with Ohio State is if the offensive line allows Quinn enough time to get the ball down the field, I think Ohio State, they're few, it's hard to say weakness. They're susceptible against the pass. I think you can have success with them against the pass if you hold their pass rushers. You can't allow them to get pressure on your quarterback. That's why their pass defense is as good as it is because they get home to the quarterback and they apply pressure. I think if you can get Quinn to stand upright, and I think you can get him in a fairly comfortable pocket. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect all the time. It's Ohio State, for God's sakes. They're going to get some pressure. But I think their corners are more susceptible to get beat than anything else on their defense. And Texas has the wide receivers to make them pay if they're going to line up and allow. They don't typically blitz a lot because they don't need to blitz. So they typically have linebackers out in coverage. They have their safeties out in coverage. They typically allow the rush with their 4-down linemen, and they typically get home. With that being said, though, I think there's got to find some gaps. Got to find something. I think Gunnar Helm is going to have a huge game. Matthew, anybody catching the ball is going to have to be big. DeAndre Moore is going to have to step up and play better. Isaiah Bond, I don't know what his situation is, Jake. I haven't heard anything injury-wise, health-wise, availability-wise.
I think he's going to be the healthiest he's been in a long time.
But he has to get Bond involved some way, shape, or
even
form.
If it's just one big play.
Even if it's a reverse. I don't care if it's a handoff. Get Bond involved somehow, some way. You've got to get this Ohio State team, this defense, to lay off the pressure and not play so close up to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. And you look at Ohio State, right? So you look at to me, you look at the Oregon games because they lost one, they won one, and they were drastically different. What changed drastically between those games from the defensive perspective? Because their offense was good both games. But do you know, just off the top of your head, what was the huge difference from that loss to the win?
I'm assuming it was the pass rush on Dylan Gabriel.
0 sacks in the loss versus, I believe it was 6 sacks. Or sorry, 8 sacks.
8 sacks.
So they went from 0 to 8.
Yep.
And there's your difference in the ball game. When Gabriel had time to pass, there was touchdowns, there were points to be found against that defense. I don't really look much into the Oregon run game against Ohio State because if you look at it, you go, wow, they had minus 23 yards. Well, they had 8 sacks, so there's minus 43 yards of sack yardage in there. And they just didn't. It was they were behind so fast that they just couldn't run the football.
No, they weren't going to. Yeah, they weren't going to run the ball. So, but that to me, that's a huge part of the success for Texas in this game, is allowing Quinn the time to get receivers down the field and attack the corners. Safeties are good, linebackers are good. I think the only somewhat viable weak spot that you can attack is on the outside against these corners.
It to me, it should look like a Michigan game plan. And I'm curious to see if you agree with me, and I think you will, but I think this is a game, everyone's talking about getting the run game going. Well, we said so many times early on in the season when Quinn was healthy and playing well, and I do think Quinn has been playing some of his best football here recently, this is a pass to set up the run team. And then it became a run first team. And now I think that you're playing a defense that's the level of Ohio State, this is a game where I expect the opening script to be very pass heavy. I'm sure there'll be some runs mixed in to try to get the offensive line going. I know the offensive line has spoken outwardly about being very upset with how poor the running game was against Arizona State, as they should be. But I expect this to be a very pass-heavy first half for Texas, and I think it needs to be. I think that's their best chance to win, is to come out and sling the rock to start, and then hopefully get those safeties and those linebackers to where they can't just play downhill, because much like Arizona State, Ohio State's safeties and linebackers are so good at attacking the run game and just shutting it down from getting to that second level for the running backs. And so I think it needs to be some of that quick game needs to be the extension of the run game to start, and then taking advantage of those intermediate routes and hopefully see how well the offensive line is holding up in pass protection, and then kind of formulate your game plan from there.
Jake, let's kind of compare these two teams. When you look at Ohio State's offense compared to Texas's defense, you're going to get a true sense of a top 5 matchup. I mean, these are two of the top teams in the country without a doubt, even whether that be statistically ranking them, where they're ranked, in terms of the AP polls, college football playoff polls, whatever it is. These two teams are the 2 top teams in the country, because you've got Ohio State's total offense and points, they're number 6. Texas's defense ranks number 3. In yards per game, their offense is 22. Texas is number 3. In points per play, they're number 3. Texas is number 4. Yards per play, they're number 4. Texas is number 2. Almost in every metric, this is a top 5, top 10 matchup. And then you look at Texas's total offense versus OSU's defense. And by the way, the point ranking looks different drastically. Ohio State averages 36 points per game. Texas averages 34 points per game. And the difference between those just 2 points is Ohio State's ranked number 6 in the country. Texas is at 15. So don't think it's some drastic difference just because the numbers look that way. But Ohio State ranks in points per game, number 1. Ranks yards allowed per game for Ohio State's defense, number 1. Opponents' points per play, number 1. Opponents' yards per play, number 1. Texas yards per game is number 12 in the country at 444. Again, these two teams match up very well against one another. I would say that you give maybe Texas's defense the edge over Ohio State's offense, and then maybe you give the Ohio State defense the edge over Texas's offense in terms of just statistically looking at what they've done this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I think we would both agree that on the field performance, you definitely give the edge to the Ohio State defense over the Texas offense. And then you would give the edge to the Texas defense, but I think the last 2 weeks have changed the opinion of a lot of people on
And
that subject.
I agree. Jake, you go ahead and you have some. I think you have more thoughts on the Texas defense versus this Ohio State offense, maybe than I do, or at least a perspective.
My biggest hope is that while Will Howard is mobile, this is not Cade Klubnik or Levitt. At the same time, by far the best weapons around him as compared to those two teams. So that's the difference, right? This is going to be a better offensive line than both those teams, better wide receivers, everything. But I think it's all going to come down to, can Texas affect Will Howard? If the answer is no, the defense isn't going to have a good game. It's going to be similar to what we've seen these two playoff games in terms of yardage, in terms of points, if not more, especially from the points perspective in regulation. And so for me, it really all comes down to, can you not let Ohio State gash you in the run game? That's an obvious, right? I think everyone knows that. In football, stopping the run is always a key. But can they have a pass rush against Will Howard? Last year against Phoenix, they didn't have a great pass rush and it killed them. This year, they're playing a team with incredible weapons, probably not quite the same level quarterback, though Will Howard is on a run where he is playing elite level football, especially throwing the deep ball. Can they get that pressure this year? Because it doesn't matter how well your secondary is covering when you have the playmakers that Ohio State makes that are just going to be able to go up and catch the ball in double coverage or have a slight step and Will Howard actually be able to deliver that throw, much like we saw Cade Klubnik do against this defense in the passing game. And so my view is purely Texas's pass rush will decide this game, unless the outlier there is if Ohio State is just running the ball all over them. Ugh.
I feel like this has a very similar matchup issue to that Washington game a season ago in the semifinal game. You had Roma Dunze, you had Polk, you had all the weapons on the outside for Washington. Now you've got Igbuka, and now you've got Jeremiah Smith, who are just dynamite players and just beast on the outside. And Ohio State obviously has great wide receivers. They've had great wide receivers for the last 10 years. It feels like they've got 2 or 3 first rounders every single year that just they rotate out. And so it'll be interesting to me. Manny Muhammad is going to be a huge factor in the success of this game for Texas on the defensive side of the ball. Can he cover long enough? I'm not saying single coverage man-to-man against Jeremiah Smith, because Will Howard's going to go to him 10 times out of 10 if that's the case. But is Jahdae Barron and Manny Muhammad and the secondary going to be able to shut down the outside long enough, not shut them down just for the entire play, long enough for the pass rush to get home? And that also has something to do with Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, Ethan Burke to get home. That is going to be huge. And that's something I'm going to be looking at very closely early on is, does the secondary defend long enough? Do they hold their own long enough to allow Will Howard to at least second guess or hesitate or go to a second, third option and allow the pass rush to get home and put a little bit more pressure on him?
Which also goes to the standpoint of, I'm going to be really interested to see how Texas defends third downs, especially third and mediums and longer. Are they going to try to blitz? Are they going to try to sit back in coverage? And I think a lot of that will be determined on, are they getting a pass rush, just sending 4? If they are, I think that opens up a lot more options for defending third downs, because I think third downs is going to be crucial in this game. I think Texas's offense has got to find a way to convert, and because they're going to face third downs against this defense that they have to convert to keep a drive going, keep the defense off the field, get points on the board, and especially since you probably don't want to be attempting any field goals, they need to end in touchdowns.
I don't want to attempt a single field goal, to be 100% honest with you.
I think Sark's going to be, I think Sark's going to leave it on the field. He's going to be very aggressive on fourth downs, and I will not be going, why didn't you take the points? Because the answer is because those points more than likely don't exist.
Are we done with Arch this year? Do you think the package is done? Do you think teams know? Or do you think Sark throws? We didn't see him at all against Arizona State.
I think he might try it and try to throw a pass out of it. I maybe we see it. I think it'll all be based off game state. Against Arizona State, he might have wanted to run it, but they had so little snaps, and you're not bringing that in that fourth quarter to try it.
No.
That's a terrible idea. I think if we see it, we'll have at halftime. If we haven't seen it, we're not going to see it, or at least I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think if we'll see it, he's going to test it early in that first quarter. I think there's a chance we see it in the first quarter on a 3rd and short, and it could be I'm going to go for it if we don't get this, but I'm going to do a play action and go over the top.
Okay. Yeah. No, I like that line of thinking. Jake, in terms of rushing comparisons, you look at these two teams, their offenses actually are pretty similar to one another in terms of how efficiently they run the ball. Ohio State in rushing yards per game, they're at 169 they rank 49th in the country, which is not middle of the road, but, slightly above average, being a top 50 running team. Texas is at number 55 with 165. So a 4-yard difference per game in terms of the rushing numbers for these two teams. But then on the defensive side of the ball, again, very similar. Texas allowing 111, good for number 12th in the country, and Ohio State is the number 4 rush defense, averaging 92 yards allowed. And so I think running the ball, as important as it is in a style of game, I think these two teams, they rely on the majority of their yards through the passing game. And I do think whoever can establish not the best running game, the most efficient running game in the most crucial parts of the game, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4, who's getting a rushing first down out of those downs? Who's getting big plays in the run game when they matter the most? Not necessarily just, they ran for 150 yards, the other team ran for 50 yards, that team wins with 150 yards. I think it's more so going to the running game is going to be reliant on situational football and the efficiency in which those teams run those plays out of it.
Yeah, and that's what kind of scares me about this game, to be honest. I think Ohio State has a big advantage at the running back position over if you just compare it to Texas running backs.
Just in terms of the players themselves, yeah.
Yes, just the talent level. Henderson and Judkins are both. I mean, Judkins was like one of the top portal guys this last year coming out of Ole Miss, and he's coming off a good game against Oregon. Henderson had a 66-yard run against Oregon. I mean, those are two guys that would start for Texas. No disrespect to Wisner or Blue, they just would. Both of them.
Would they start over Baxter?
I don't know, because we've only seen that's so hard to ask because we've only seen a freshman season from Baxter. I think the form of Baxter we were going to get this year, from what all reports indicated, was he was going to be pretty special. And considering we've seen the leader that he is while going through all of this, I imagine he was going to have a big sophomore bump.
Yeah.
But I don't know the answer to that question.
I know.
But they would certainly start. And that's saying a lot about them, because I don't think Wisner's bad by any means. But there's a difference between a Travion Henderson and a Quinshon Judkins over a Wisner. I think Blue has that level of talent, but unfortunately, we just have not seen it from a consistency standpoint, and we have not seen the ball security.
He has the explosiveness. I don't think he.
I mean.
Yeah, he has the explosiveness to be on that caliber. He's not an every down, give it to him 20 times a game type guy that's going to, lead the offense in terms of the workhorse ability of a running back.
I think a lot of that is because of the fumbles, though.
Yeah.
When you're fumbling it once every 12 snaps,
he fumbles it whenever he gets hit out of bounds. He fumbles it. The amount of times he fumbles on the sideline and it pops out of bounds is astonishing to me. It really is. I mean, if that counted as a fumble, he'd be well into double digits, Jake. Let's go ahead and go and give our keys to victory. Let's go ahead and jump into those. We each typically give out 3 keys to victory for Texas. We've already talked a lot of strategy, matchup, what we like to see for Texas to have success. Jake, go first.
Yeah, a lot of these I've already mentioned. While we've kind of talked the strategy of the game, naturally, you're going to talk about key points of the game when you talk about strategy. You want me to list all three or one by one?
Sure, just go all three, and then
Yeah.
I'll give you my
Uh,
three.
so first off, I have on here, we need the regular season Texas defense, not the playoffs defense. And I know we've seen the flashes of brilliance in the playoffs. And you think about all the stands on 4th and 1, but they have allowed, and it happens when you play against better teams, but I want to see them get Ohio State off the field. When you get them into 3rd down, get them off the field. And I think that's the difference between the regular season defense and the playoff defense is getting stops on 3rd downs. We need to see the offensive line. I already said it, play A&M or Clemson level game. And that doesn't mean you have to run the ball like you did in those games. I don't think that's realistic against this Ohio State front. But from a pass protection standpoint, and just from a winning your individual matchups standpoint, it needs to be that level of game. And that could still involve them getting beat more than they did in those games because Ohio State's better than those teams. But if they put in that level of performance, it'll give Texas a good chance to win. And then lastly, they got to score touchdown on drives, especially when they're moving the ball. It has to end in touchdowns. I expect Sark to go for just about every 4th down when they're in plus territory.
If it's not a punt, if it's not a punt, then it's a 4th down attempt with the offense out there.
Yeah, you feel like you have to in this game, and maybe that depends on how the defense is playing. But I don't think you're attempting hardly any field goals outside of 40 yards, and even inside 40, unless you have a lot of confidence in Will Stone. I would be pretty hesitant to line up and attempt a field goal unless it's 4th and 15 or something that's just not even manageable, and it's a 40-yard kick. At that point, you have to. But if it's 4th and 4, 4th and 6, 4th and 7, even, I think you probably go for it.
I think if it's anything within 4th and 10, and it's within a manageable, field goal range ish, I think you go for it.
Situation. I mean, there's situational.
And obviously,
game where you would kick it.
Obviously, if you're down by 2 and there's 2 minutes remaining in the game and it's 4th and 10 and you're on the 20-yard line, like
you have to roll the dice at that point with the kick.
You have to, unfortunately. But anyway, my keys to victory, Jake. The defense, it has to play the game of their lives. They have to play the game of the season this year, and I think you kind of touched on that. But for me, it's best game of the year. The receivers scare the hell out of me at Ohio State. Jeremiah Smith is on a different level, and you're going to have a top 15, top 10 guy and Ibuka there on the other side of him. And it's just nasty. And they've got weapons, and Will Howard is a much more than capable quarterback of not screwing this thing up for Ohio State and just letting the talent around him. Not to say he's not talented in his own right, because he is, but I'm saying it doesn't take a lot for Will Howard to have a good game with the talent that he has around him. There has to be some sign of run game. Again, it doesn't have to be great. I mentioned that, but it has to be something. It has to be big in the big moments.
Michigan.
A third and 3 run to the outside and getting a 1st down does so much wonders for the confidence of the offensive line, so much wonders for the running backs. A 2nd and 7 1st down run for 8 yards to get into opponent territory is big. Also, a run that is longer than 7 yards as your longest play of the game also would be beneficial as well. So something along that. I'm not saying it has to be a great run game. It just needs to be something. And then Quinn and Sark, they have to execute their game plan to perfection. They have to be on the same page. Quarterback, coach, the two faces of this program right now, your future hinges on Sark and Quinn executing the game plans of their lives. And yes, Sark can execute a game plan, and then the talent on the field doesn't do it for him, but the team as a whole just has to execute the game plan. You execute the game plan, you have a chance to win this football game. And I think a decent chance to win this game. I think if you're having stupid penalties and turnovers and miscues and you're roughing the punter on 4th down on a forced punt and you give Ohio State a second opportunity, that's not executing a game plan to perfection. And that is going to make your percentages from a 51% chance of winning this game down to dramatically to about a 20% chance in this game.
Yeah, for the run game, I was going to say, I think of the Michigan game, where if you look at the stat sheet, it doesn't blow you away at all. But I think when most people think back to that game, they think of the run game being successful.
Absolutely.
Because you change what you consider success based off the opponent. And Michigan has a really good front, as we have seen. Their defense was good throughout the whole year, especially the run defense in that front seven at stopping the run. And so, to me, that's what success in the run game looks like, is just being able to get those third and shorts, being able to every now and then get a run on first down for 6 yards, maybe getting a run, a 15-yard run on a second down and 7 or
Right.
something like that. Those are huge. I think of the A&M game, when the run game started to get going, it was, it's second down and 12, and you do a run and it's 18 yards. And that just feels like such a burst for the offense.
Yeah. Or even if, say, you get a false start and it's 1st and 15 all of a sudden, and then you get a run play that's 10 yards and you gain a lot of that back, or you gain more of it back, and then 2nd and 5. Like that's just huge for the morale of your offensive line and your offense to run efficiently.
And it slows down the pass rushers.
Yes. It keeps them honest.
If you're one-dimensional against Ohio State, I'll just say this right now for Texas fans, the play calling don't matter.
No. Jake, in-game predictions, what do you got? We can go one by one with this.
Yeah, these aren't positive. They've been positive all season. Even when I picked Texas to lose in the SEC title game.
I think this is going to be a perfect example, Jake, of you and I being pretty realistic fans. Now, we've obviously been biased in favor of Texas. Well, guess what? Texas has been without a doubt, objectively better team than almost every team that they've played this year. So we have made our predictions based on that. I think this is going to show what kind of fans you and I are.
Yeah, which some people will say, oh, you're negative, you don't believe. No, I'm just trying to look at it based off what most people are thinking going into this game.
I just happen to be a fan of one of them.
Yes, and I want them to win. With every fiber of my being, I want. But when I am going to say things that are going to go on a public forum, essentially, I'm going to say what my football brain is actually telling me, not that means anything.
Yeah.
And one of the things my football brain is telling me, which hopefully my football brain is being stupid, is I think Texas will take an early 3 or 7-0 lead. Then they won't lead again in the game.
That's tough. Jake, if we win the coin toss, I believe the defense will go out on the field first. And much like, this isn't one of my predictions, by the way. This is just bouncing off of your prediction. Ohio State might go down the field. Well, maybe not might, but probably will go down the field, much like Arizona State, much like Clemson, and finish that drive with points on the opening drive if Texas wins the toss and defers.
Opening drives have been an issue.
Yeah.
Especially in the playoffs. And I feel like that used to be a thing for Texas, and it kind of went away this season, and now it's reared its ugly head.
Coming back up all of a sudden, rising from the dead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I was going to go ahead and give mine. Here's my prediction. Big if, all caps, Texas wins, OSU will have to be held to no more than 20 points. Again, that bounces off my key to victory of Texas is going to have to play the defensive game of their lives.
Which I actually disagree with you on that. I could see Texas winning a 31-27 type game.
I was going to ask that earlier, and we kind of got
even
off topic.
Even a 34-31 type game.
I was going to ask you, do you see this, if this ends up being a shootout, Texas wins the shootout?
More often than not, no. But I can see them winning it. I mean, the offense has the ability to do it. Quinn goes out, plays his best game. You play that Michigan first half level football, and you do that for a full game. Because keep in mind, he just didn't need to do that. He passed the ball like 4 times in the second half of that Michigan game. If he just kept throwing it, his numbers could have been unreal in that game. I mean, I don't think it's impossible to see a world where Quinn goes out there and throws for 400 yards, has the career game. It's against the team he originally committed to.
Yeah.
And that's the storyline. I don't think it's impossible. Do I think it's likely? No. But I could see Texas winning a shootout. where it's back and forth and it's nothing like anyone expected, because we see that type of stuff happen in the college football playoffs. Again, likely, no. Can I see it? Yes.
Okay.
There is that positive. There's still some positivity in here, despite the fact what my predictions are going to sound like. Yeah. So I think the run game is just going to have to be thrown to the shelf very early on in this game. I think Ohio State, if they get a 2-possession lead, you're not running the ball well at that point with the season on the line, you just have to discard it. Against Arizona State, they kept trying to run the ball because they were up.
Yeah.
And that's what Sarks likes to do. If they're losing, he's going to throw it to the side and just start throwing the football. And that's where the pass rush really scares me for Ohio State.
My next one, I think Texas starts out hot, possibly even leads at halftime. Maybe not by much, but I think a lead at halftime. And I'll leave it at that. I'll let my final prediction score go where I think the second half goes, because I think that third quarter is going to rear its ugly head again.
Yeah, I think a lot of the discussion at the end of this game is going to be, was the Texas, and it'll suck to say it, but it'll just be the discussion of what people will be talking about is, was this Texas defense really a top 2, 3, or 2 or 3 defense in the nation? Because I think Ohio State's going to get over 500 yards of offense.
Oh, wow.
And kind of have their way. That seeing Arizona State be able to do that, and yes, I know the offense didn't help, but still, just seeing that and thinking about all the weapons that Ohio State has, and now that they're clicking at the right time, I have a really hard time seeing this defense slowing them down, and I hope I'm wrong about that.
And leading into my next one, that third quarter woes is going to finally be the end of the Texas Longhorns season. I think unless, hey, if I'm wrong and Texas comes out at halftime and actually puts up a third quarter worthy of putting a team away, or at least catapulting Texas into a position to win in the fourth quarter, I'll take it. I'll be happy. It'll be the first time it's happened all season. But I think you can't keep surviving with third quarters that have been a detriment to your team's success.
Yeah, even in wins. And so, yeah,
it's not it's not a sustainable way of living.
This isn't necessarily a prediction for this game. This is a playoff prediction that I'm just throwing out there now, is Ohio State ends up winning every game by multiple possessions. And just everyone goes, wow, the most talented team in the country by every metric just turned it on for the playoffs and just buzzsawed their entire competition and went on a run where they beat a Tennessee, they beat an Oregon, they beat a Texas, and then in my case, they beat Penn State for a second time.
Yeah.
And much more handedly than the first time.
I would agree. I think the Penn State Ohio State hypothetical matchup in a national championship would be terrible. It would almost be me not wanting to watch that football game. I will, but I wouldn't want to.
There's a reason a lot of people had Texas Ohio State in the national championship preseason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people are treating this game as a national championship, because I think all the lines suggest that whoever wins this game will be favored by quite a bit against whoever comes out the other side. And I think most people generally think whoever wins this game will win the national championship.
Jake, I have, kind of piggybacking off of one of your takes, one of your predictions. Quinn Ewers gets sacked 6+ times in this game. I'm just gonna. I don't like to talk about it. I don't like to say it out loud, but
this isn't fun.
It's not, but it's what my eyes and what my heart and what my brain is telling me is going to happen.
What we're not going to do is be like a lot of the OU fan bases and just pump sunshine to pump sunshine. If we think Texas is mismatched somewhere, we're actually going to say that.
Yeah, yeah. And in a bad year, thankfully we haven't had this podcast during a bad year. But if we have a bad year in football, trust me, you're going to hear it right here. You're going to hear every bit of.
You're going to hear it in basketball season this year.
Yeah. But I think Quinn is going to be under duress, and he's not the most pocket present friendly quarterback in terms of avoiding sacks. I'm not sure if all of them are going to be on the offensive line. I have a feeling it's going to be a little reminiscent of Georgia at in Texas, not the SEC championship game, but the one at home.
Get ready to hear the storyline of the game, by the way. Sawyer was Quinn's roommate when he was at Ohio State.
Love it.
So, yeah, I can already hear the commentators just over and over just lashing me with that point.
Every time Sawyer gets a sack,
Yeah.
his former roommate.
And so, my last prediction goes to you, not our listeners, but to the Texas fan base of Twitter, particularly. Everyone will blame Sark and Quinn. And I'm sure there will be Texas fans openly saying, go to the NFL, Sark, after this. And who will feel really stupid if he does go and then the program burns down. But I won't be saying that regardless of what the score looks like.
I will never say it. I want Sark to be here for life, even if he doesn't get a national championship in the next 10 years. I want him to be the head coach at Texas for the remainder of my lifetime. It won't happen, but I do want that to happen. Will Howard runs for a touchdown. He also throws for a touchdown, at least. I mean, I'm saying there's going to be more scores than 2, but I think Will Howard not only gets a rushing touch or a passing touchdown, but he also gets a rushing touchdown as well.
Yeah, I don't even think that's that crazy of a prediction.
It's not, but it's just it's a prediction. I couldn't think of many.
You should have said he was going to catch one too, because Texas is due for a trick play to hurt him again. So
the Ohio State special on the goal line, he might. All right, Jake. Final score predictions as our in-game predictions went. I can only imagine what these scores are going to look like.
Yeah, so I have Texas winning after all that. No, I don't. I have Texas winning in my heart. I have a worse score written down than what I'm going to say, just because I have changed my mind a little bit on how this game will be.
We can talk ourselves into just about anything.
Yeah, I'm going to go 35-24 Ohio State, which tells you the score I have written down on our doc where we kind of plan our show is 40-17. I backed away from it being that bad. I think Texas will show fight. I started thinking about it and I go, Sark doesn't really get blown out. Even his first year, they didn't really ever get blown out.
Yeah.
And I think that trend will kind of continue. They're going to fight. They're going to scrap. But I think Ohio State will just be too much to handle.
Jake, I'm going to go 35-20. I'm going to stay with that score that I've got written in the doc. I wouldn't be surprised. Here's my Texas winning the game score, if anybody cares to know. That if Texas wins this game, it's going to be 20 to like 14 or 17. Or it'll be like 24-21. It'll be, some kind of ugly, low-scoring, mostly defensive game from both sides, struggling offenses. And I could very well see, I think that's the avenue for Texas to win this game, is to keep it kind of a knock them, drag out, low-scoring game where both teams might be driving the ball down the field, but there's just no points to be had, that both teams kind of lock it down within that 30, 40-yard line marker in opposing territory. And, they keep these teams out of the end zone. And I think both coaches, we talked about Sark going for it on fourth down. I think both coaches are going to be fairly aggressive in this game in terms of going for it on fourth downs, not taking field goals, taking touchdowns, risking points, taking points off the board to get touchdowns. I could see it going that way. And if you get a couple of plays, couple bumps, couple bounces go your way for Texas, get a couple turnovers maybe, work with some short fields. Yeah, Texas has an avenue to win. I'm not saying it's impossible. This Texas team is obviously very talented. When you have a talented team like this Texas team, you can win any game, any team that you match up against. Just saying, in this instance, the path that we've seen, the last couple of games we've seen from Ohio State compared to the last couple of games that we've seen from Texas, kind of the trajectory Texas has been on all season in terms of not playing their most crisp football, but still getting away with wins. Whereas Ohio State right now, they're clicking on all cylinders. That's what I'm basing this on.
Yeah, we have now seen Ohio State click on all cylinders for 4 quarters. In 2 straight games.
Eight straight quarters.
In 2 straight games. And we have not seen Texas do that yet.
No.
I'd say the offense pretty much did it against Clemson. So, but Clemson's defense is not even
remotely
close to even the same atmosphere as the Ohio State defense. So I think we've laid out our reasonings as to why we think the game is going to go the way it's going, but that's just talking about it on paper. Like you said, every game gets its own flow. And if this gets out there and Texas just bullies Ohio State like Michigan does in a way, we could see a low, ugly scoring game. Texas offense finds something that works. They could go out there and win 34-31. I mean, every game of college football always has its surprises. And I'm certainly not counting Texas out of this game as much as it sounds like I have, but it's just more of a, I talked about it all year of, what are the avenues to win for Texas's opponent? Now it's kind of flipped where this is a game where what are the avenues for Texas to win this game?
Yep.
Because I don't think there's a ton, and most of them involve getting sacks, getting turnovers, and the offense not making mistakes and clicking.
Yeah. Jake, to go from one negative to another negative, Texas basketball a couple nights ago did not pull off the comeback over Auburn, lost 82-87, made it a 3-point game with under a minute to go. Obviously, Auburn was able to close that game out, and a close win is still a win in the SEC. Auburn gets the win, will probably be the number one team in the country following the loss from Tennessee to Florida. But 87-82 was your final. Arthur Kaluma, 34 points, and he had the first 30-point game versus a top 2 opponent since Kevin Durant was a Texas Longhorn.
Yep. And from about 16.5-minute mark in the first quarter to about the 11-minute mark, Texas did not score. So just over a 5-minute scoring drought.
Incredible.
There's your ball game.
There's your sign.
Yeah.
And that's a Rodney Terry special.
Because they went down by over 20 in that second half.
And that's a Rodney Terry special. That's what we have coined the term here. So if you ever hear us say the Rodney Terry special, that means there was a extremely long scoring drought where nothing happened on offense that probably cost Texas the game at some point.
Yeah. And also you look at it and you go, okay, Auburn had 87 points. They had 15 assists on those 87 points, which honestly isn't even a huge amount.
No.
Texas had 6.
Yeah, I was going to say single digits.
They didn't even have
the offense is putrid. The offense is putrid. It's ISO basketball.
There is no offense.
It's ISO. It's get your best player to line up against a bad defender and try to get points that way. That's all it is. That's the only strategy they have, and it blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, you had Kaluma go off for 34 points and 5 of 6 from 3-point, and you lost.
You won't get that performance from it. Well, it was a career game. It's a career high for Kaluma, so you definitely will not get that out of him again.
Especially from the 3-point line. And the schedule gets no easier for Texas. You got Tennessee next, who's coming off a loss.
20-point loss, which won't happen again.
Or 30-point loss.
30-point loss, yeah, with Rick Barnes. That won't happen.
And then at Oklahoma, who's been good this year other than against Alabama. And then you have at Florida,
who just beat Tennessee by 30 at home.
Yeah, and then you have Missouri. That is maybe the one game Texas will be favored in.
Texas can beat OU though. I don't know if they will, but they can beat them, and it's at Norman. Is it not?
Yeah, I've already said they'll be 0-5 to open conference play. Nothing I have seen has made me feel differently. And then you have A&M again, and then you go to Ole Miss and play against Chris Beard.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
This doesn't get any easier, and I'll tell you the game right now. I'm just dreading seeing the final score from because I probably won't have to watch much of it. It's that Alabama game.
Yeah,
Alabama scoring like 100 points on everyone. That game could be one of those box scores that lives on forever.
Yeah, it might be like 100-50 and I'm not even lying about that. Anyway, Jake, lastly, speaking of Texas, Alabama, Texas women's basketball, number 5 in the country, taking on number 18, Alabama tonight, Thursday night. Looking for their 3rd win in conference at number 1 South Carolina next Sunday, or this upcoming Sunday. Vic Schaefer had some words about the Thursday-Sunday schedule in the SEC for women's basketball, and he makes a great point. He's raised hell about it. He said he's complained every opportunity he's gotten. But it does take Sunday, a religious day for a lot of folks in the Bible Belt, in the Southeastern Conference, away from players, coaches, staff, to participate and go to church on Sunday. And he has been very adamant about getting that changed at some point. Obviously knows that's not going to happen this year. But to play Thursdays and Sundays, where in the Big 12, you played, I believe it was Tuesdays and Saturdays in the Big 12. And so, yeah, that was something that he had mentioned. And, good for Vic Schaefer for standing up for his own morals and his players and his staff that, have come to a bit of a fork in the road when it comes to their religious beliefs and their, athletic, commitment to the University of Texas.
And also not having an off day.
Yeah.
Their off days now are Monday, and you have school that day.
Yeah.
So the players don't really have a true day to just not have anything.
You have an 8 a.m. exam on Monday morning.
Yeah. And so it Tuesday, Saturday just makes more sense. I don't understand why the SEC is different on that. But then again, the SEC has one less conference game in football than every other conference. So they just kind of do their own thing.
Yeah. So, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Jake and I are predicting Texas' season will end on Friday. We'll be right here with you. Hopefully all of you can prove us wrong as to and just shove it in our faces in the comment section that we're just negative Nellies and Nancy's and had no belief in a team that made it to a national championship and is probably going to be favored in it. So hopefully that happens. That's what we're hoping on. That's what we're banking on. That's what we're praying for. But again, stay with us Monday through Thursday this week. I know it's Thursday. And so tomorrow's episode will be our immediate reaction following the game as soon as we possibly can. So stay up late for us. Stay up late with us. And we'll be right there with you. If Texas wins, we might have to go live. We'll see. That remains to be determined. But if Texas wins, we might go live. All right, Jake. Well, that is going to do it. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you, everybody. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. As always, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.